What's up folks, Toby here. How are you guys doing? I've got a cool hat and I'm bringing you a new video, a different kind of video. So here's the deal. Roughly a year ago I was planning to make a playthrough with a Bowazon on Players 8 Hardcore. Now that's already a challenge, and to make things worse I didn't have any of the GG gear like Faith, Windforce, Fortitude, Reaper's Toll, Atmos Carab, and I was also too dumb to figure out you could use Lawbringer as a source of Decrepify and Act 5 mercenary. So I was in a pickle. Which bow will perform best when I'm on a budget? And most importantly, is there a significant difference between them? Why was I worried? Well, if you go to any Diablo 2 forum, what you'll find is that the consensus is simple. Bowazons suck for PvE, which for the most part is true. But what you'll also find is that you can forget playing them without Faith, Ice or Windforce. Turns out it's not quite the deal. So for this video I ran a test with Windforce, Faith, Goldstrike, Lycander same, Eaglehorn, Witchwild String, Buriza and Hellcrack. Yeah. You can find timestamps in the description below if you want to skip the details of how I did this test, but in a nutshell, Faith is indeed godlike, the rest of the bows performed similarly. With that said, let's roll the intro and see what I got. Right, so let me disclose this is a very rough test and in no way should be treated as the end argument. This is both due to the fact that I used the exact same gear with every single bow, that means I didn't take advantage of each bow specifics, and I only did 3 Chaos Sanctuary runs with each bow, which is way too small of a sample size. The gear I used was Treachery, a poor man's Fortitude, Kira's Guardian to take care of the resistances, High Lord's Amulet, which is pretty standard I suppose, Dual Raven Frost, and I didn't have attack rating issues because I was using Demon Limb on Switch. The boots were War Travelers since ranged attacks don't benefit from crushing blows, so Gore Riders became way less good of an option. Belt was Razor Tail. This one is pretty debatable. I can see other options as well like Nosferatu for the attack speed, but if I didn't miscalculate, the extra 10% wouldn't have helped me hit the next breakpoint anyway. Finally, gloves are crafted safety for increased attack speed, mana steal, resistances, and most importantly, knockback. Now this is my personal preference for hardcore, as I think knockback on a Bowazon is crucial, which you may notice throughout the footage of this entire video. Nobody ever gets close to me, and I'm not even running any Decrepify source or Holy Freeze on my mercenary, so it's literally the knockback that keeps me safe. The entire inventory was pretty much damage charms with a couple of resistances, so with all that I was rocking close to maximum resistances, and some may point out that that's before proccing Fate on Treachery, so I was actually having too many resistances. But here's the problem with Treachery. When playing a Bowazon, you won't really be proccing it pretty much ever as you're standing so far in the back, so I just wouldn't count on it. You could make it a hybrid with Javelins and Shield and proc it that way, but it wouldn't do much for the sake of this test. Anyway, next up is Mercenary. I didn't use Lawbringer or Reaper's Toll on him for one reason only, which is to have the full effect of Witchwild String. With that said, if I was using any of those items, the relative results would only change for Witchwild and Hellcrack, as a lot of their value comes not from high physical damage. Lastly, the bows themselves, I upped them all so they'd all be elite bows with higher base damages, and I actually didn't socket any of them except for those that always have 2 sockets. So the ones that had 2 sockets, I used one of those slots as a sort of a natural advantage. So I hope I did mess up with the breakpoint calculations, and I inserted roughly a 40% enhanced damage jewel into both Witchwild String and Hellcrack. Lastly, for the test to be a success, I had to subscribe to my own channel, become a Patreon to myself, and oh, that's the stuff that you have to do. Right. As you can see, there's a bunch of issues with my test. It doesn't take into account the amplified effect of high physical damage bows like Windforce because I didn't have the Decrepify amplified damage source. For bows with knockback, I could switch gloves to laying of hands for the extra damage. For bows with piercing attack, my belt was pretty useless. For Witchwild String with high deadly strike, High Lords is useless. And lastly, of course, the sample size is really small. I had run speeds vary up to 20% with the same setup, which pretty much means that the sample size of free runs is statistically insignificant. Now with that said, who cares about statistics? You all came here for Diablo anyway. So let's jump right into it. The results I predicted were rather simple. Faith and Windforce, way ahead of every other bow and quite similar to each other. Next up, I expected to be Lycanders because of that at 25 to 50 damage, and Witchwild because of the amplified damage on striking. The rest I expected to perform equally. And holy crap, was I wrong about everything except Faith. First up, Goldstrike. It turned out to be the #1 worst bow, with average runtime of 9 minutes and 20 seconds. Do you note I am playing hardcore and I was picking stuff as I was clearing, so the absolute numbers will be different for everyone playing softcore and just going for the speed. With that said, I suppose the reason why Goldstrike underperformed so heavily was because of the low base damage. Even though you have a lot of enhanced damage by percent undeads and demons, low base damage will still hold you back. Second bow I tried was Eaglehorn, and this was probably the most interesting find. It actually got the third fastest runtime of 7 minutes 21 seconds, which is only 3 seconds longer than the second fastest bow. I have to attribute it to the attack rating issues. I was having on average around 10 to 12k attack rating with other bows, which let me hit monsters at around 85% rate. So the extra 15% or whatever it gives with ignore targets defense is actually huge. Third bow I ran was Lycander's Aim. This was also unexpected as it turned out to be the third worst one with a runtime of 8 minutes and 5 seconds. I suppose other bows just have better mods, but yeah, honestly, I don't have a good explanation. Fourth bow was Witchwild String. It turned out to be in the middle of the pack even though I expected it to be at the top. The amplified damage was huge. I was struggling to take down anything before the amplified damage proc, but when it proc, everything melted instantly. With that said, only 2% chance to cast amplified damage was completely unreliable. So if other bows were using like Lawbringer or Mercenary or Atma Scarab, Witchwild would be at the absolute bottom, I imagine. Next up, Hellcrack. This one, as expected, turned out to be one of the worst ones. 8 minutes 20 seconds runtime, low base damage, low attack speed, and since a huge portion of its damage comes from elemental attacks, if other bows would be using Decrepify, Hellcrack wouldn't benefit as much, so most likely it would perform even worse in comparison to the other ones. The other crossbow I tested was of course Buriza, and it did really well, which is kind of to be expected. I mean, its base damage is pretty much the same as Windforce. Average runtime, 7 minutes 45 seconds. Alright, so now the goodies are left. First we have Windforce, and this came as a massive surprise to me. The runtime was 7 minutes 18 seconds, which is only 3 seconds faster than Eaglehorn. Sure, with Windforce you can get laying on hands, gloves for a fairly massive damage increase, and you don't sacrifice the safety of not having the knockback effect, but still, I did not expect it to underperform by this much. Even Buriza was only slower by 27 seconds, that's not a massive difference at all. So yeah, overall this was extremely unexpected to me. But with that said, we arrive at the last bow, which is Faith. Average runtime, 6 minutes. Now we're seeing a significant difference, which can't be ignored in spite of sample size. We're talking about 18% faster clear speed compared to the next best bow. We're talking about a 36% faster clear speed than the worst bow. And it scales really well with Decrepify as well, so changing gear into better stuff, we'd still be getting the same results. I suppose lastly it's worth mentioning I did a single run with Mavina's set for Ice Maiden. Just a quick fun comparison, one run only took me 8 minutes 30 seconds. So it's somewhere in the bottom half of the pack, but having in mind I've never played Ice Maiden before, it's probably closer to the middle of the pack. And that pretty much wraps up my test, so let's do a quick overview, a summary of the results I got. All 8 bows ranking from the top, best performer Faith, to the bottom, worst performer Goldstrike. Faith was considerably better than any other weapon by outclassing the next best bow, Windforce, by a whopping 18% faster runtime, and outperforming by 36% the worst performer Goldstrike. Windforce, the expected second runner, barely beat Eaglehorn by a couple of seconds only, 3 seconds to be exact. Perhaps with different gear the gap would increase, but it's definitely not massive. So the conclusion seems obvious, you do not need only Faith or Windforce to be able to play properly in PvE. Last noteworthy mention is Witchwild String. Even though it ranked in the middle, getting a source of Decrepify on your Mercenary or Atma Scarab would leave Witchwild String in the very bottom of the pack, since the entirety of its value came from being able to melt stuff the moment amplified damage proc, which did not happen too often. So yeah, take this result with a grain of salt. And I think that's it for the summary. To me, it's quite clear. In PvE, you don't need the best bows to be able to enjoy the game. Sure, you won't be the magic finding machines, but if you want to enjoy the game, you'll definitely be able to. So here's my question to you folks. Did you expect such results? For me, it was kind of cool to see how wrong I actually was with my initial predictions. For someone who barely Fury crafts and relies on experience alone to make correct judgments, well, I guess I should Fury craft. I mean, clearly, I'm wrong more often than not. So, with that said, hope you folks enjoyed the video. Let me know if I should make more similar videos like this one. And, you know, have a lovely day. See you guys in the comment section. Cheers.
Hey, this sounds just like you smashing that subscribe button after seeing this video.